Sim. No final, quando acabar, já estava no YouTube. Na verdade, já estamos no YouTube. E agora não pode mais parar. Oi, gente.
Is there any problem, Jim, if we tape the conversation? No? Ok. Mas onde que eu vejo onde as pessoas estão conectadas? Ou se estão conectadas?
Em YouTube? No YouTube?
Eu tenho que abrir outra página, então.
Você tem a ver do YouTube, mas você não precisa. Tudo que a gente tem no YouTube, a gente tem aqui. Eu posso abrir o YouTube e ir monitorando aqui se der algum problema, mas a princípio a gente segue aqui sem olhar o YouTube e tá tudo bem, porque já estamos no YouTube. A
Tá,
gente
ok. Já tem gente conectada? Eu não consigo ver.
não, por aqui a gente não consegue. Eu vou ver aqui e te aviso. Mas as pessoas vão chegando.
Tá bom. É que eu não queria começar sem ter alguém, assim, sem ter pessoas.
Nunca saberemos bem. É melhor começar. Segue aqui sem olhar o YouTube e tá tudo bem, porque já estamos no YouTube.
Ah, eu consegui. Já tem gente conectada? Eu não consigo ver.
Não, por aqui a gente não consegue. Eu vou ver aqui e te aviso.
Oi, pessoal, boa tarde. Boa tarde, Annelise. Boa tarde, Lucas, Davi. Agora eu consigo ver. Tudo certo. Nossa, gente, essa tecnologia é muito doida. Eu tive que congelar a minha página do YouTube, senão eu ia ficar ouvindo duas vezes, né, Eduardo? Ok. So, let's start. Muito obrigado pela presença de todos e todas nesse primeiro encontro de 2020 do GEAS, o grupo de estudos sobre o ator no audiovisual. Jim, I'll make a quick presentation from your work in Portuguese and go back to English, okay? Então, pessoal, temos a honra aí de receber o James Naremore, professor da Universidade de Indiana, que é, sem dúvida, o maior especialista nos estudos atorais no mundo. Escreveu esse livro que para nós é seminal, né, fundamental, o Acting in the Cinema, livro publicado em 1988, e que foi traduzido, entre outras línguas, acabei de descobrir isso vendo a página do Jim, foi traduzido também para o chinês ou mandarim, não tenho certeza, além de uma versão em francês. Só existe o livro nessas três línguas, infelizmente. Mas que para nós que trabalhamos com estudos de atuação, que trabalhamos com atores, corpo de ator, persona, performance, tudo que é ligado à atuação no cinema, o trabalho do Jim para nós é fundamental. Então é muito bom tê-lo aqui. E a gente hoje vai concentrar a discussão em torno do Acting in the Cinema, né, porque é um livro que a gente já tem trabalhado no grupo de estudos. A gente poderia falar de uma série de outras obras que o Jim tem com relação a diretores importantes de cinema, com relação a gêneros, mas a gente optou falar especificamente do Acting in the Cinema, que é o livro que vem alimentando as nossas discussões no GES há bastante tempo. Então, eu vou só explicar um pouquinho a dinâmica, tá? Bem rapidinho. Como vai ser uma conversa, um tanto quanto informal, eu vou passar a palavra para as pessoas que estão aqui no chat, né, o Eduardo, Luísa, João e Gúriva, que são pessoas que trabalharam de perto com o Acting in the Cinema, né, a gente se aprofundou bastante nesse texto nos últimos meses, junto com alguns outros alunos, mas eu optei trazê-los aqui porque são pessoas que já estão íntimas do texto do James, e eu acho que pode dar uma repercussão legal. O texto do James é fundamental para a obra, né, de todo mundo que está aqui, então é um momento também da gente procurar saber alguma coisa que ficou talvez não tão bem tratada no texto, não tão aprofundada, então a ideia é que a gente use a presença do James para poder aprofundar no geral e nas questões que a gente trabalha especificamente nos nossos trabalhos. So, Jim, thank you very much one more time for being with us today. we're going to start the questions. We have 3 hours, but if you are tired, you can end up earlier, no problem. But we have 3 hours to discuss and to go deep into your work that is very, very important for us, acting in the cinema. We would like to know more about the circumstances of your writing, the spread of your ideas. So we'll be doing some questions. The questions will be around our concerns as researchers in acting studies. Eduardo and Luisa, they work about the contemporary Brazilian actor, professional and non-professional. So they'll be discussing about this sense. Guriva, he's a PhD that works about the Japanese cinema and mainly about Toshiro Mifune's work. So he'll have also some questions about this epic actor. And João, he works about the issues of presence in the cinema, the production of presence, the dimension of presence, and how to film a body to escape the usual production of character effects. So we're going to start with Luisa, because she have to leave earlier. So Luisa, the word is yours.
So, hi, thank you, Pedro. Hi, Naremore, my name is Luisa. I would like to thank you for being here. For us, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I'm gonna read my question, okay? So, in the introduction of your book, Acting the Cinema, you already talk about the influence of the social sciences as well as Goffman's work to assess the distinction between theater and the daily presentation of self. In the chapter Protocols, you question how to determine the difference between performers in everyday life and performers who are behaving theatrically, thinking about the concept of frame proposed by Goffman. So considering such distinction, do you think it's possible to use the same tools that you use to analyze the techniques of the stars to analyze the performance of people who appear in a non-fiction film? I mean, taking the context into account, do you believe that's possible to think of documentaries as being also a performance text, as the materials you analyze in the part 3 of the book? I think you're...
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, I think it is possible to talk about documentaries, and I wish that I had in my book. There are many films that are either we would easily classify as documentary or as semi-documentary in one way or another. I recently wrote a book about the African-American director Charles Burnett, and his early film Killer of Sheep has people in the neighborhood appearing as performers in the film. So this line of distinction between what's theatrical and what's not is sometimes very hard to determine. But you and I, of course, we're performing right now, and one could analyze our body movements, our expressions, our presentation of self, and but that presentation is being mediated by this broadcast. So yeah, it's really a simple answer to your question. I don't know if it's helping very much, but yes, absolutely. I think it would be very interesting to do that. An awful lot of documentaries really are not, what to say, even Flaherty's so-called documentaries, people in them were instructed by Flaherty. They were blocked and moved. Anyway, that would be my answer. Okay?
Acho que o Pedro está mutado. Você estava falando, Pedro?
Estava falando. Thank you, Jim. Luisa, do you want to put some more question?
No, I think it's okay. It's because I studied performance and self-presentation in documentaries. So based on the work of a Brazilian director named Eduardo Coutinho.
Yes,
so
I know. I've
yes,
seen it. Yes.
So I'm interested in that kind of issues.
Yes, yes. Darlene, who you just met, she's writing a book about a Brazilian documentary.
Nice.
And so I know about Coutinho. Yeah.
She's writing a book about Coutinho?
About the history of Brazilian documentary, yes.
Okay, okay. So you're a little bit familiarized with
Yes.
Coutinho's work.
Yes.
That's nice. Okay. Who want to take the second question? João, maybe?
Yes, okay. I have a more general question to begin with, and it's about the broader context of film studies, because in the introduction to your book, you mentioned Budovkin's work in the 20s as the first important book to really approach this matter of performing, not to a live audience, but to a film camera. And film acting has, of course, changed in many different ways since then, since Budovkin. And your book demonstrates, among other things, how the introduction of sound and the influence of Stanislavski were key factors for these changes. Critics have sparsely discussed these issues, and a lot has been written about performance in interviews, stars' biographies, acting manuals for aspiring actors, and so on. But still, compared to other fundamental aspects of cinema, such as mise-en-scène and montage, acting appears to remain somewhat neglected as a film theory subject. Well, that's my point of view. I'm not sure you agree with that. So I guess my question is, do you agree with this point of view? And why do you think this happens? And also, I'm interested in the context, like, how did you first perceive the field of studies, of film studies, when you were working on your book back in the 80s? And how do you perceive the same field of studies now?
Film studies today. I'm a little more familiar with things that have been written by academics, by scholars about actors than I was then. I'm trying to recall I think you're asking me two questions. One is how I became involved in writing about this, and then why acting or performance has been relatively neglected, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's about the context in the 80s when you were writing, and also, I mean, film acting has changed, and it has been sparsely discussed here and there, but it still seems sort of neglected.
I think I believe one reason why it's been neglected is that it's very hard to do. I think even though we now have the digital, which allows us to quote a little more easily in the context of critical writing by illustrating, it requires a strong ability to evoke performance through writing. And that, I think, is the great difficulty. You need to be able to describe things very closely, and it makes it hard. So I think that's perhaps one reason. Another reason would be, especially here in the United States, on the part of academics, to push back against celebrity culture. Our culture is, and perhaps your own, is too much preoccupied with celebrities that you see on television. That's one reason why we have the president we have today. And writing about performance might seem to be complicit with the media machine that controls everyone's lives. So that would be another reason why perhaps it's neglected. I have been surprised, however, with the reception that my book has had. When I wrote the book, it got hardly any reviews, and the people the professional people who read the book, the manuscript of the book, though they recommended publication, they weren't enthusiastic about the book. And so I thought it had failed. It's not one of the best-selling books that I've written, but it has grown over the years. It's now being translated into Italian. It was just translated into Romanian. I've been enormously gratified by the influence it's had and surprised by it. I still don't know if I'm answering your question fully. Maybe.
Yeah, yes, you are. And if I may, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure,
because you were saying about like pushing back celebrity culture and trying to evoke performance through writing.
Right.
And these are some of the main difficulties. I think I agree with you. And my follow-up question is that when we are reading your book, we notice clearly that to analyze specific performances, you always try to contextualize the actors you are talking about, and you refer to other roles they have played, and you discuss their public personas. You explain how producers, directors, the media, and other actors, all of them help shape the way audiences perceive the actors. And also you seem to avoid some terms that are nonetheless often employed. For instance, by other critics and scholars. For instance, instead of talking about charisma and screen presence, it seems to me that you prefer to offer very detailed descriptions of gestures, movements, and expressions. And also, instead of focusing on stars' striking auratic effects, like celebrity effects, you prefer to elaborate on the traits that compose what you call their ideal acts, right? And all of this suggests not only deep historical and biographical research that goes behind each analysis, but also a strong and very specific methodology at work. But only occasionally does the book explicitly discuss or make straightforward remarks on these methodological tools and steps that have guided the analysis. So I'd like, if you could elaborate a little bit more on this, on the methodology of film acting analysis. For example, what do you consider to be the methodological missteps one must be careful with when dealing with film acting?
Where to begin? I thank you for your comments. It's very nice what you say. In writing the book, I gradually discovered what I was writing about. My ideas developed as I began writing. And at the time that I was writing the book, Richard Dyer had written a book called Stars, which is a seminal, and I admire Richard greatly. He's one of my favorite critics. It was a seminal book, and I did not want, as a result of that book, there was developing in film studies a large amount of research about the star system and about how sort of ideological analysis of stars. I did not want to do a stars book, even though I was writing about star performances. I wanted to concentrate on the actual work that the actor does, the labor, if you like, that's involved in acting. And I wanted to situate that in the context of whole movies, so that anyway, that's what became, if you like, the methodology of the book. When I started writing the book, I didn't know anything about Goffman. That was a great discovery for me. Everybody in film studies was interested in Brecht, and of course I knew that was going to be relevant. And so, as I think I spelled out at the beginning, in terms of theory or methodology, I was just ping-ponging between realist acting, Brechtian acting, and the performance of self. So anyway, that's how the method works. But I think I still I'll digress for a moment and say that I'm currently writing another book about acting, and it's a book entirely about Cary Grant, and it's a book called Some Versions of Cary Grant, and maybe this will help answer your question. It starts with a notion I already mentioned, I think, in the Cagney chapter in the acting book, with the idea that if we're approaching the performances of a star in the old Hollywood system, you need to distinguish between the actor, who is a physical subject with certain traits, maybe certain mannerisms, some inherent, some learned, some abilities, strong in some ways, maybe not in others. So that's the actor. And then you have to talk about the role, which may or may not fit close to those abilities, but the role is going to determine, certain roles are going to determine what emerges as the image, the star image. And the star image is usually, I think, grossly oversimplified. So that in the case of Cary Grant, for example, one thinks of a man in a drawing room, beautifully tailored, perhaps his hand in his pocket, and so forth. But when you look at Grant's career, it's a much more complicated issue than that. So I'm always interested in burrowing beneath the celebrity image and talking about the texture of the work and the variety of it. Am I answering you? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. And it's very nice to know that you are working on a new book. I'll be looking forward to that.
It'll be about a year before I'm done. Yeah.
Ok. Não sei se passamos para outra pessoa fazer a pergunta.
Let me, can I just say something? Yeah, in regard to Cary Grant, for example, sometimes you need to do research because sometimes the actor does things that you assume were the product of the writers. You may have seen Bringing Up Baby with Katharine Hepburn. It's one of Grant's most famous movies. There's a famous scene in that where her skirt, he steps on her skirt and the back of her skirt tears off, and he has to walk her through a crowded room, covering up her exposed rear end. That whole idea was thought up by Grant. It wasn't Howard Hawks. It wasn't Katharine Hepburn. So he was a marvelous actor at improvising and thinking up comic routines. Anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Draw a little later because he has another question. Now it's Gulliver, please.
Hello, on one moment. I put the question in the chat. Yeah, here now.
I see.
And here. Hello.
Yes, I'm just gonna read it. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jim. I don't know if you want I read the question or...
No, I'm reading it now. Just, yeah.
Ok.
Gulliver, explica a sua pergunta então em português enquanto ele lê.
Ok.
Yes.
Bom, minha questão é sobre os termos do Brecht que ele usa no livro, principalmente com relação ao épico e ao distanciamento. Então, eu trago a pergunta para ele sobre esses termos que no teatro são claros, porque o Brecht defende isso muito bem nos seus livros, mas que no cinema me suscita alguns questionamentos. Então eu trago a questão sobre o movimento e o gestual do ator asiático, no caso japonês, que são baseados nos seus teatros, nas suas formas teatrais, né, que são distanciadas desse mimético e da verossimilhança usual em Hollywood e no cinema europeu. Então, a minha pergunta é se ele acha que se esses atores se aproximam, se esse corpo teatral se aproxima dessa defesa do Brecht em relação ao distanciamento e ao ator épico.
In terms of the Asian cinema or the Japanese cinema, someone like Ozu, for example, he's always spoken of as a perfectly realist director in the sense that he has these domestic stories and the camera angle doesn't change and so forth. But yes, certainly that kind of acting is different from the realism, naturalism of the Hollywood or the European films. It seems to me, anyway. But because I don't know a lot about the culture, I tried to avoid in the acting book, and it's one of the limits, and one of the things that's not so good about the acting book is I was centered on Hollywood because that was the cinema that I knew the best. And I was a little bit afraid of writing about non-Hollywood, European or foreign films, for fear that I might not understand the culture well enough. It's hard for me to know when I see, let's say, a film by Ozu, how much of it that looks alienated, if you like to call it that, or different, is simply the different culture. But there is, of course, Eisenstein wrote about at the time of European modernism, an awful lot of artists were interested in Japan in particular, so that you get Eisenstein writing about. I'm blanking on the formal theater in Japan. What am I trying to think of? Somebody.
The no theater, the kabuki.
Yes, yeah. With the masks and
no theater, the no theater.
Yeah. And I think an awful lot of European artists were interested in that. Orson Welles, if you probably have seen The Lady from Shanghai,
Yes.
Orson Welles claimed in an interview, there's a scene in The Lady from Shanghai that takes place in an Oriental theater.
Mm-hmm.
Wells claimed that he was influenced by Brecht and that he wanted to put that scene in there to collaborate with the rather exaggerated form of acting in his own movie. So yeah. Now to go back to Brecht, I can't claim to be a great scholar of Brecht. Theater that I've seen and movies that Brecht worked on, I sometimes ask myself when I see them, wait, what is this alienated acting? It looks like acting to me.
Yes.
And when, as far as I can figure out, when Brecht spoke about the epic theater, there's an awful lot of emphasis on the gestus, a significant gesture on the part of the actor that is sort of symbolic, almost like writing. And I think that's an element of this alienation effect that he's talking about. And I think when he speaks of the epic theater, I think he means narrative theater. He's going to the old classical idea of epic, meaning as distinguished from lyric, let's say. And so I think for Brecht, especially in the theater, writing was always important. And, you know, somebody like Godard appropriates that because you see Godard in his films often using non-diegetic inserts or writing on. And even somebody like Tarantino, I don't think he realized he's influenced by Brecht. It may come via Godard or something, but that sort of writing that sort of breaks the illusion in a certain way. And I think Brecht thought that the audience, when they read, are in a different mental set than when they watch a realist performance. So
yes,
I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
yes, help. Thank you. It's,
Jim, I have a question to follow up Guriva's question. You just said that you were afraid to talk about foreign films, that you might not have knowledge of this culture to talk about the film. It's something that always intrigues me as a researcher. How necessary is to know a culture to talk about the films of that culture? How is it for you?
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. It was only that I was afraid to write about, for fear that somebody in France, if I wrote about a French film, would say, oh, he doesn't know X, Y, or Z. I came to writing about film as an English professor. And my early work was about literature. And I was interested in modern British literature. My favorite writers were James Joyce and Virginia Woolf and those people. Though I know a bit of French and a bit of German, I felt like I didn't know the language well enough to be able to talk about performers performing in their own language. Does that make sense? I mean, I might not recognize the nuances of the accent or a certain play that was going on, whereas if it's an American actor, I know it's not just a matter of knowing the language, it's a matter of knowing perhaps an idiom or the way a certain tone of voice might play. So I just felt more at home in writing about the Hollywood films.
Well, it makes me think about some judgments that we make about performances when we are dealing with films that come from your culture. I believe sometimes we are more severe on judging this kind of performances than we are from judging other kind of performance from another countries, because we know the difference between a good and a bad performance in our language, in our country, in our culture. And it doesn't really happen like this when you talk about a distant culture also.
Mm-hmm. I think it seems to me that Hollywood in the classic period, which is what I mainly have written about in the studio era, was heavily influenced by European cinema. I mean, World War II brought many European artists to work in Hollywood. But I think the kind of Hollywood realism that they developed was a more or less. They had very large foreign markets, and I think they wanted to make something that would be satisfactory to everybody. So it isn't necessarily in that period. You don't get a lot of extremely naturalistic or realistic picture of behavior and social class in America. You get a kind of a uniformed thing, and so it becomes a kind of stylized form of acting, I think.
It's for me, it's one scene. It's in particular, it's very good. It's a scene for Macbeth,
Mm-hmm.
Kurosawa film.
Yeah.
And the scene of the late Macbeth death and tomorrow, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
The text it's completely different. It's everything is actor body, only the body.
Yes.
For me, these two, the distance for Brecht, the effect.
Yes. No, right. Although I'm asking myself, in the United States, that film is called Throne of Blood. It's not called Macbeth. It's not really a straight attempt to do Shakespeare. I mean, it's about a medieval Japan.
Yes.
It's wonderfully weird because of the behaviors of the actors, which is not obviously naturalistic, but it's not the no theater either. I don't know what specific Japanese things it might belong to, but yeah. But if you take the Seven Samurai,
yes,
and you compare that with the Hollywood Magnificent Seven, the Seven Samurai seems, but maybe because it's set in the Middle Ages, but it seems far more stylized in terms of the performances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
I'm going to put my question here on private chat so you can check this out. And I'm going to say to you, just that if you listen to me as well, but you can check that too.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned. I'm a little bit concerned that we still praise a good performance in cinema in terms of expressive coherence. Every year we can ensure that the acting Oscars will be won for those who never leave the role. In your 80s book, we can clearly see that film acting is under the hegemony of realistic interpretation, and its exceptions are due to an epic approach, as we just discussed it, that in modern cinema, especially outside in the US.
Yeah.
So I just saw that the whole question didn't stuck here. Just 1 second. So in today, it seems that we are still under the influence of this double approach. We could perhaps add some experience in the dialogue performance. Are there? I just can't forget the incredible scenes in Pink Flamingos, the John Waters films as well. There's a different thing there, but they are very punctual experience. Do you see any way out of this Stanislavski Brecht duality, or in the great cinema, in the massive cinema, mass cinema, we can say that we still praise the same James Dean and Marlon Brando acting style. And can we go further? That's my question. Do you see any steps far away from that? I'm just a little bit tired of listening about Stanislavski and Brecht. I love them a lot. But I just say that we're still in the past century.
You know, I lost you there. Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay. Jim? I am seeing
Can you hear me?
you clearly.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, a little bit. It was interrupted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. We can hear you clearly.
Okay. Can I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Your picture is stopped every now and then, and your sound is intermittent for me. But I've read your question, and I think I can say something about it.
Yes,
Okay?
your image is perfect, Jim. So go ahead.
But it was that I was having trouble. I was having trouble. His image was freezing on me, and I couldn't hear what he was saying. Okay. So
okay.
But I would love to know your way out of this, this dilemma that you talk about. And what I suspect is that I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that one way out of this is to say that in reality, things are more complicated. That some of the things we say belongs to a Stanislavski tradition or a Brechtian tradition or an ordinary realist tradition, any one of those, if you go into them, if you examine them closely, they don't fit the stereotype always. I don't know if I'm making any sense. The only way you would be able to break out of it would be to find a whole new theory of performance. And I'm not sure we need that. When I may be wrong about this. I admit that I am not an actor, and I didn't have any. I did appear in a few plays. I even was in a little movie once, but I don't have any experience with that sort of thing, and I don't claim knowledge of it. I'm a person in the audience, but I do think that often the categories we use, that even I use to talk about acting, can be very much oversimplified. Is Marlene Dietrich a realist actor? Is she is Mickey Rooney a realist actor? And is Brando always a method actor? In fact, Brando was never really a student of the method. I think if I look at a Scorsese movie, let's say, a gangster movie by Scorsese, I think he's using Italian working class mannerisms, and therefore what we think of as the method is a useful way for him to work. But just as much improvisation goes on in other styles of acting, and so I don't know. I don't think I'm answering your question. I think I'm flopping around. I think it's an excellent question, though. Can you think of any film or any performance that does break out of the mold that we're talking about?
I think that here in Brazil, we have the Helena Inés movies, Rogério Ganzella. Rogério Ganzella movies. I think he has those Hans Lerman, non-dramatic those. I think my sound is cutting.
Yeah.
So I'll try to.
Yeah,
I'm some considerations about that. I can talk as well. I'll do that.
Okay.
So I put Pedro back.
Yeah, we're having some internet problems, I think. Who wants to take the next question? Godiva, João?
I think it's interesting when you mentioned that you have a literary background, in literary studies, and despite that background, and despite focusing on Hollywood narrative films, I find it very interesting that you frequently stress the viewer's delight, right? You write in terms of delight. You stress the viewer's delight in bodies and expressive movement outside the appeal of narrative, of storytelling. And I was intrigued, for example, by your comments on Cary Grant's physique and on Cary Grant's socks in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. It's funny and also very engaging to read your comments on that. And I believe this spectatorial investment in non-narrative aspects of a film that resonates not only with the cinema of attractions period and with experimental cinema, but also with some also with contemporary media culture and social networks. For example, it seems to me that most videos in popular apps such as Instagram and TikTok, not sure if you are familiarized with that, but most of these videos could easily be described in terms of non-narrative displays of bodies and performing skills, right? So I guess my question is, why do we have the, where does this delight come from? Why is it so persistent? And also, again, that's another way of asking the same question I already asked you, but how can we transpose this delight without undermining the objectiveness of the writing of our analysis?
Yeah, I'm pleased that you realize that often I'm writing about pleasure. And once again, I felt when I wrote the acting book, film studies was very heavily influenced by what was known as high theory in those days. And so I felt I had to show my credentials that I was aware of theory. But a lot of that theory was puritanical in form. That is to say, it was reducing everything to capitalist manipulation and believe me, I am a very left-wing person. But I felt that one of the problems with left criticism is that it often denies pleasure, and so I wanted to talk about that. Now, in terms of the short form video things, I am, as you can see, of an age where I'm not as familiar probably with these things as you are. But from what I know, which may be wrong, they seem to be short form. They're not hour and a half, 2 hours long. And I think in order to do things with that longer form, you need narrative, or you need some kind of structuring device. But as you say, the cinema of attractions has been with us for a long time, and this is the cinema of attractions. It's the delight in seeing something new or strange or funny, or enjoying dance, yes, that, I mean, this is performance. I think that I think all the things that I wrote about, or almost all the things I wrote about, though, were dependent on narrative. That is to say, the actor's job is to contribute to the narrative. But you don't have to do that in order to do performance.
Okay, I also have I had prepared another question, and I think this is the right moment. So I'll just the others, please excuse me. But this other question is that film acting is just one way of dealing with people in a film, right? There are many other ways to deal with that, and another way would be to adopt a more phenomenological approach and think about bodies as raw material that's converted into a moving image. And as an image, these bodies can be considerably manipulated and distorted, multiplied, fragmented, and so on, as Méliès has proved many, many times, right? And I think that despite the absence of the original body here and now, because of course we are in a mediated environment, but despite this absence, there are many ways for film and video to preserve, or perhaps even enhance a sense or some sense of bodily presence. So that's something that is very interesting to me in my current research. And in this regard, I think that most scholars argue that narrative films tend to dismiss or to minimize the body's original presence in order for a character to properly emerge. For example, Jacquemont, in his book about the face in the cinema, he argues that most Hollywood films make an effort not to attract too much attention to the bodies, And Vincent Amiel has a similar argument in which he claims that classical narrative films end up dematerializing the actors' bodies. But I find that theoretically very interesting, but at the same time, it seems a bit difficult to understand how that relates to the actual experience of the viewer. And yeah, so I don't really have a question. It's just more to, have you considered approaching these more phenomenological strategies for reading film acting? And what do you think could come out of this?
Sure what it would look like. I'm not sure I agree with Jacques Aumon's argument. I think that the actors' bodies are very important to even classical Hollywood films. Yeah. I guess we're in a world now where the ability to do digital post-production and manipulate flesh tones, all kinds of things, add another level of what would we say, tinkering with the image, which was always there. But I think Cary Grant's body is hugely important to all of his films. And I think James Cagney's body, and I think Marilyn Monroe's body, and I think Barbara Stanwyck's body is there. So I know that there was lighting, that there was a skilled photographer, that there was makeup, that there, but this presence, I'm not sure where it would be when you finally get to it. I mean, what would it? There is already a sense of body presence for me. I don't know if I think it's a very interesting question. I'm not sure. I feel I'm not answering it very well.
But yeah, I think it's a question that is we are asking ourselves more and more as we have these digital technologies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm also thinking about, for example, the de-aging of actors in Scorsese's The Irishman, or performance capture in sci-fi and fantasy films.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and also deepfake videos, which create like fake performance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just got through writing a little book for the British Film Institute. You know, those film classics series. I don't know if you've ever seen those. And it's about the O'Fools movie, A Letter from an Unknown Woman. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's always been one of my favorites. It stars Joan Fontaine. And in that role, she has to age from an adolescent to a mature woman with a child. And she was 30 years old when the movie was made. And there was no de-aging process. So in a film like that, the audience needs some suspension of disbelief, but it believes that Joan Fontaine is there imitating a teenager, more or less effectively. And we've lost that, I think. That's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's also an argument by Tom Gunning in which he claims that special effects are often considered as attractions on their own, but actually they are supposed to go unnoticed most of the time.
Yes, most often do. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think these new technologies, say for instance, motion capture and CGI, do you think of them as additional layers, such as costume and makeup, or do you think of them as having a transformative power to the very art of film acting? Do you think it can really change the game, or just another layer?
I think it. I don't know if it can change the game, but it is. It does have it obviously has an effect. I don't know. I wrote something. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I wrote this book about Stanley Kubrick, and at the end of that book, I wrote about AI, artificial intelligence, which at that time was a kind of cutting edge use of CGI. I don't agree that a lot of theorists at that time felt that CGI was going to be the death of the human. That we're entering some strange new world. And I don't believe that. If you go back to the whole history of special effects, they've always been, as you say, trying to be invisible. And even in the classic Hollywood period, there were times when some of them were invisible. So I'm not quite as pessimistic about that as others have been. I think that AI, though, was an extremely interesting use of that technology. I think there's an ethics involved in the technology, I believe. Probably there isn't any kind of manipulation of the image. I don't think it takes us away from where we've been before. It's just complicates things, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, in AI, artificial intelligence, Haley Joel Osment never bats his eyes. So there are things the actors do. Yeah.
Ok, Pedro, a gente cai. Estamos online? Estamos there?
João, I hear you, but I don't get anybody.
Thank you, Jim. We have a question from a professor in our... Estamos. Me ouvindo? Do you listen to me, Jim? Are you listening, Jim?
I can hear you, yes, but your image is freezing.
Vocês estão me ouvindo, gente? Alô?
Okay, go ahead and talk.
Alô?
Hear me?
Eu tô te ouvindo, Pedro. Acho que teve algum delay, mas parece que já voltou.
Question, Jim, from a fellow professor in our theater department in our university. I'm going to share here with you, okay, in the private chat. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I don't see anything in the private chat.
Okay, I just put it now. Just a second. E eu vou pôr a pergunta em português para o pessoal ler a pergunta da Luciene.
Yeah, I just need to read it.
Okay. Take your time.
Yes, I absolutely. This was the case with Stanislavski, and I would think it is important for any. If I were directing a movie, I would want to do the same thing. If I and I assume other people do as well. How to answer the question, because there's so many different kinds of movies but the study of the script has to be important. Certainly it does in narrative cinema. The need to develop a role of some kind, I think it's just as important as it would be for Stanislavski. It may not go, Stanislavski would have actors, if they were a butler going off stage, imagine what they were doing off stage for a while and then come back on. I'm not sure the conditions of production for a motion picture where things are not often shot in chronological order, where they're in bits and pieces. This needs a different kind of a about the script. Also in movies, there's more room for improvisation in the performance, so that the script that they start with may not be what we see on the screen. The actors may play with it. And I'm not saying that when we witness the scene, we necessarily know when an actor is improvising, but in rehearsal, the actor can invent a gesture, a line, and sometimes they do in very good ways. Again, going to back to the example of Cary Grant, I don't know if you've seen His Girl Friday, but there's a scene in that where Rosalind Russell throws a purse at Cary Grant and misses him. And he says, "You used to be better." And that line wasn't in the script. It was just thought up by Cary Grant on the spur of the moment. So that the script is the baseline. It's very important. But depending on the kind of film that's being made, or maybe the kind of theater that's being done, it doesn't have to be, and perhaps should not be, treated as important as biblical script. Let's put it that way. I don't know if I'm adequately answering the question. It's a good question.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Maybe Lucienne, if she wants to go deep on her question, she could write it on the chat. We have another question here from my co-writer of the Elena Inez book.
Very good book. I enjoyed that.
I'm going to put it here for you on the chat. Just a second. Can you see it on the screen?
I don't see it yet.
Not on the chat, but on the screen.
On the chat, on the screen. Oh, I see.
Yeah. Can you mention a film you've seen lately that you consider that it shook the ground?
My brain has been so preoccupied with the research I'm doing. I'm trying to think. Of course, I have. Huh. 15 minutes from now, I'm going to think of something, but right now, oh gosh, I would. So, Sandra, do you have a film that did that for you? Maybe that will help me.
Ele está te devolvendo a pergunta, Sandra. He said, in terms of acting, of course.
Oh, just in terms of acting.
Yeah.
Oh.
We can go back to this later, of course.
Yeah,
when you think about it. Okay. I have a question myself, Jim, for you. I would like to talk about the third part of your book, the part 3, that is called Film as a Performance Text, where you analyze Rear Window and The King of Comedy. I believe it's a very interesting approach of film studies, joining it with film acting, because you treat the whole film as a text talking about acting procedures. How did you end up on this methodology? And can you think about other films that could enter this kind of approach as well?
I think basically I was simply talking about the ensemble of actors, not necessarily all the time emphasizing the star. I can't remember why I chose those two films. It's been so long ago. King of Comedy, obviously, because it was a film about performance, and Rear Window has always been one of my favorites, if not my favorite Hitchcock movie. And I realized as I thought about it that if so much, dating all the way back to Kuleshov. In fact, when I was originally writing about acting, there was this sense that actors really don't do very much. I mean, they be attractive, and and they read the lines in movies and so forth, but their performance can be manipulated by the editing and by lots of other things. But you know, going all the way back to the Russians in the silent period, their theoretical writings about movies made actors seem simply puppets that a director and an editor could control. And Rear Window struck me as a film that because of the way Hitchcock shot it, you could say this was a classic demonstration of Kuleshov. This is as Hitchcock says somewhere, a good actor is somebody who can do nothing extremely well. So the idea is that it was me manipulating this performance. And it seemed to me, no, there was really quite a large range of performance skills involved in the movie. But yeah, I'm not answering your question except to say that one could do this with any movie as far as I'm concerned.
I have a picture that I like particularly, and I believe that you can use it to be read in this methodology of yours. That is Manuel de Oliveira's picture called Palavra e Utopia, Word and Utopia, where we have three actors to play the same role, the role of the father, the Jesuitic father that lived in Brazil. And he chooses three actors in three different ways of acting. One of them is his grandson, that is almost an amateur actor. The second one is a very experimented Portuguese actor called Luis Miguel Sintra, very epic. And the third one is a real naturalistic Brazilian actor called Lima Duarte. So we have three different ways of acting for the same character. I believe it's very interesting, this picture, for this kind of analysis.
Is it like Buñuel's That Obscure Object of Desire, where you have two women playing the same role? You know, and in other words, they don't. One will go out of the room, and then another one will come back in the room, and the film just keeps going. Is it like that?
No, it's not that violent. It's chronological.
I see.
The one is the father on his early ages, after the mirror, mature, and after the old one.
I see.
But you can see three different actors acting for the same character. And that's the most interesting. I believe we can go back to João, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I want to go back to Cary Grant one last time, because when you were writing about him, and I'm going to make a direct quote, you say that, for want of a better term, Grant might be called a Kuleshovian rather than a Stanislavskian actor.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think that's a very provocative idea. I'd like to know more, and if you'll be developing more of this idea in your next book. And how did you come to this idea? And also, I think in relation to an article you had on imitation, when you were writing about the biopic, and how at a certain point Hollywood seemed to have abandoned imitation as a counterfeit or fake. Mm-hmm. And if bringing back Kuleshov in this context of Cary Grant, that's another way to reevaluate imitation in film acting.
The Russians had an idea of what they called biomechanical acting. And I think the models that they chose, or that they admired often, were the silent comedians like Chaplin and Buster Keaton. Cary Grant, his original acting training when he was a teenager and before he came to America was in something called the Bob Pender Troupe in Bristol, England, and that was an act of young boys who walked on stilts, who did acrobatic tricks, who played the piano, who cross-dressed, who did comic routines. He began as a vaudevillian clown, and he has that acrobatic skill always with him in the movies. And what was I about to say? Something about, oh yes, why did I call him? I think he was an ideal actor for Hitchcock because he could do the most minimal things, just look this way or look that way. And Hitchcock, had an idea how that close-up was going to fit with the next shot. And somehow Grant, he fulfills that idea of an actor who can do nothing extremely well, but it's not that he's doing nothing. He has a control over his body, his putting the hand in the pocket, shrugging a shoulder, looking with apparent inexpressivity, but it actually has a meaning to look. So he's a great biomechanical actor in that way. And I think he was very, very strongly influenced by the silent comedians. I think Chaplin was a big influence on him. So that's why he's so good in farce comedy, for example. So he has many, many different skills, but a lot of them originate right out of that kind of control of the body, very specific control of the body.
Yeah, I find it very interesting because you seem to apprehend Cary Grant as a plastic material that contributes to the rhythm of the film, and you don't go. You do go as far as analyzing psychological traits of the character and so on, but by focusing on this physicality of the actor, and I think that's really, really interesting. I have yet another question I have in that same sense. Is that, when you claim Kuleshov to point this technique of Cary Grant, you could have been pointed to, let's say, Delsarte, for example, François Delsarte. I'm gonna write it. Okay.
Yes. I think.
But you chose Kuleshov, and in a certain way, Kuleshov was always perceived more by the Kuleshov effect and montage and all that, and people seldom remember that he's done other things concerning film acting, right?
Yeah. Could I have claimed Delsarte? Of course I could, in a lot of ways. In that, I think when I brought that issue up, it was in regard to the crop dusting scene, where Grant does nothing but stand on the side of the road. And to me, it was the mastery of these little small movements that you don't feel like he's being wildly expressive. And it was that kind of control that I thought made him an ideal actor for Hitchcock. But he can go the other way. For example, and again, this is related to the comedy stuff. In Bringing Up Baby, he plays this spectacled professor who's very repressed and stiff. He almost did not take the role because he told Howard Hawks, "I don't know how to be an intellectual." Well, he does. And Hawks said, "Think about Harold Lloyd with the eyeglasses," and that was the key to the performance. So he has a lot of roots in this physical comedy, and in a subtler way with Hitchcock, another kind of physical.
Thank you. I think I was muted. We have other questions, right?
The question, Guriva? Tá mudo.
Hi. The question is about the movie, The Hell in Pacific.
Oh yeah, I saw that came up. Yeah.
Yes, I study to.
Remind me now, Hell in the Pacific. Which?
Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune.
Oh, right. Okay, it's John Borman, right? Is the director?
Yes.
I haven't seen that in a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, because for me the interest is the body is communication. The body is only for I take the question in the chat. One moment. Here. Okay. I put the
Português, porque o pessoal não está tendo acesso ao chat.
Bom, a minha pergunta foi sobre um dos filmes que eu analiso é o Inferno no Pacífico, que tem o Toshiro Mifune e o Lee Marvin, onde os personagens não falam a língua do outro, um é japonês e um norte-americano, e eles não falam as suas línguas durante todo o filme. Eles falam suas línguas durante todo o filme e não se entendem. Então, eles se comunicam apenas com as expressões físicas. Então, quando no capítulo sobre a retórica e a técnica expressiva do corpo, ele cita o corpo como instrumento de comunicação. Então, esse é uma das bases da minha análise, que o corpo é como um instrumento de comunicação. Um comunicante. Foi?
Yes, I mean, this is, to me, when I read what you've written here, it's less a question than an interesting insight, and I would agree with it. Yeah, what is it about Lee Marvin? He belongs to a kind of category of actors who would never have been movie stars before the period when he becomes one. And there's something eccentric about him. And it's as though the particular combination of physical traits he has, the high muscularity, the sort of craggy, not very handsome face, the deep voice. Once in this period, when he becomes a leading actor, he's impossible not to watch. And Mifune, who is not physically like him at all, but that's an interesting comparison. Mifune is, am I right? Is Mifune actually exhibiting some kind of special training, or is he a unique actor? Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I see. It's come to the martial arts, the training is so.
Yeah. Yeah, Mifune had a larger range than Lee Marvin, right? Because you can see him doing doesn't he do the one about the man who's dying? What's the one I'm trying to think of? The Kurosawa movie that.
I Live in Fear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He's very different in that, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marvin, once he becomes a star, is always Lee Marvin. Although Marvin started out, you may know, as a supporting actor always, sort of as a tough guy or a gangster or a comic dumb man or something like that. And along with him at the same time was, as I get older, I forget these names, Charles Bronson.
Yes.
He had also been a supporting actor. He becomes a star almost at the same time. Yeah, and Clint Eastwood, I guess, does as well. Anyway, yeah.
think?
I think it was this fondness for these muscular guys that happened in this period. I don't know. But, yeah.
Yes.
So now I'm gonna read a question from the audience from Rogério, our colleague. He's asking about the Bresson method. Bresson.
Yeah.
Considering that he was looking for a purely cinematography acting, Rogério is asking about the contribution of Bresson in the acting studies.
I think Bresson is essential to talk about if one talks about acting in cinema. I mean, you may know this because I've written something about Pickpocket. I'm blanking. What's the name of the actor who plays in Pickpocket? I can't think of his name. Anyway, he hadn't had much experience as an actor, and Bresson did his usual Bresson thing. He doesn't want the actor to emote, to show emotions. He speaks about the actor as a model. There was one, according to this fellow, there was one scene in the movie where he had him walk upstairs, and he said he shot that about 40 times, and he never explained why he had to do it over and over again, and he didn't ask him to change or anything, but he said, as an actor, I felt the tension of the scene because of that repetition. In other words, whereas Bresson seemed to be trying to empty the actor of emotionality, it was actually increasing the actor's own feeling of something. But Bresson is very special. He's unique, and I don't know of another director who works that way. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, just commenting, yeah. But yeah, he's extremely important. By the way, that actor who was in Pickpocket, after he worked with Bresson, he had never acted in a movie before. He was a very handsome fellow. He went to the U.S. and he studied with Strasberg in the actor's studio. It was like you were going from A to Z. I mean, it was just the absolutely opposite approach to acting. And then he went to Mexico and became a film actor there.
Jim, can we say that, talking about Bresson, can we say that we have a bad heritage from Bresson's work in contemporary cinema? Because we see many pictures, many directors, many filmmakers trying to empty the actor from a naturalistic play, and most of the time it doesn't work. I mean, the actor just seems that he's completely empty from life. And Bresson, he doesn't. His actors were not empty from life; they were empty from this naturalistic tendency, but they had lives. And can you see some bad heritage nowadays?
You never feel in Bresson that this is some kind of stylized, robotic form of acting. It has great intensity, yes. I'm trying to think. Some movie I saw recently reminded me of Bresson, and I can't recall what it is, but I think there have been people who remind you of Bresson a little bit. Yeah. And I'm not sure actually that if you read Bresson's notes on the cinematograph and his ideas about acting, I'm a little skeptical that he actually worked that way all the time. He seems to me, in a way, in some of his films, very, very like Hitchcock, in the sense that Hitchcock also wants to use the actor as a kind of model for point of view shots and stuff. So For example, a man escaped, it's called in English, condamné à mort, s'échapper, you know, the film I'm talking about. If you look at that, there's an awful lot of cool Shavian stuff going on there. You know, it's the point of view of the actor is very important. So you could say that that's what's influencing the performance. But yet the actor also seems highly emotional to me, even though he's not very expressive.
I have another question, a polemic question this time. I'm going to put it on the chat, Jim.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it in Portuguese, okay?
Okay.
For our audience. Oops, não, botei errado. Aqui. Eu perguntei para ele se... Porque eu acho que existe um conflito da maneira de ver o ator no cinema e no teatro, na perspectiva, né, dos estudos cinematográficos e dos estudos teatrais. E eu perguntei para ele se existe até um grau de, como que fala, de alguns atores se sentem menosprezados quando algum teórico dos acting studies ligam a essência da performance ao dispositivo cinematográfico. E aí eu pergunto para ele se ele sente isso nos Estados Unidos, né, no meio acadêmico dos Estados Unidos, e o que ele poderia dizer para confortar os atores.
I don't know if any real actors ever took any comfort from what I've written. I would be pleased to know if they, I wasn't trying to teach anybody how to act, and so, you know, many people may think that the kind of writing, many actual professional actors may think that what I'm doing has no relevance to them. Although there is one actor I can think of who does like my work. I guess I was always in the book doing precisely what this question asked. I was trying to say, yes, I imagine actors do feel underestimated when the camera and the cutting is emphasized more than what they do. But I think anybody who is, I've said I had a very slight experience trying to make a movie, and did make a movie which I wouldn't want you to see. But anybody, I think, who has actually ever made a movie, if it's a fiction movie, not a documentary, knows how important the actor is. Even if the actor doesn't do anything special, even if the actor is untrained. So much about movies is about watching people. And the actors are as important as anybody else, the director, the screenwriter, the whatever. So, especially in movies, but of course on the stage as well. Yes, yes. Henry Fonda's acting in The Wrong Man, for example, it's very Bresson, like Bresson. Yes, absolutely. That's why I said that I think Bresson resembles Hitchcock to me. That's, you know, Hitchcock doesn't want the actor to emote very much. He wants the actor to be a model. That's a good example, The Wrong Man. Yeah.
Yeah, I have yet another question. I remember when reading Richard Dyer Stars, he ends the book by saying that a lot of research has to be done on the side of the viewer, because yeah, I mean, it all really depends on how the viewer engages with the actor and the characters and so on, and that raises a question for me that's about a difference between the process of the actor and the result on the screen. And in your chapter about Marlon Brando, you end your chapter by saying it's very ironic that his search for truth and authenticity ends up as a showcase for technique. And I think, yeah, I agree with you, but I think it's a different spectatorial postures, right? It's different. One viewer that thinks of his performance as authentic is not the same viewer who thinks of it as a showcase for technique, right? So also, I think my question is, how can we as scholars and critics and researchers deal with this, this question of subjectivity, the viewer's subjectivity? I think your mic is out, James.
Do you want me to unmute? I can. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yes. When we watch a movie, we're using our own subjectivity, and some people may see Brando in a totally different. I'm not sure where Richard Dyer was going with that conclusion. I'd have to go back and look at the book to see what I think. But it sounds as if he's gesturing toward a form of reception studies. And there's an awful lot of that now in film studies. Fan culture, a kind of, sociological study of fans. And that's valuable. I don't object to it. But I was trying to be a critic, and the critic, maybe I didn't convey it enough, but certainly it is my opinion as a viewer that this is what Brando winds up being. It is my statement as a critic, and one can disagree with it. But yes, other viewers may not agree with me at all about that, or may not feel that when they see the film. I think Brando was publicized so much as this great actor of a new style and everything that maybe that's the reason that I became skeptical and was a little. Anyway, yeah.
And you also comment that some things we perceive as natural are actually conventionalized expressions. And also when you comment makeup, you say that we praise natural look, but natural look comes from a makeup department,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, this balance between
right.
process and result.
Right, yeah, right. I think I used the example of Bonjour Tristesse, where at the end of the movie, Jean Seberg removes her makeup in front of a mirror, and that is supposed to signify authenticity. So there's always this suspicion of cosmetics or makeup, so the idea is to disguise the makeup as much as possible. But it's anyway, that's that kind of search for purity. We can be skeptical about that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Jim. Hi again. I asked you in the chat. I write in the chat.
Oh, I see.
Yes, the last question.
Yeah.
And I speak in Portuguese for the audience, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Eu fiz uma pergunta sobre o que ele acha da combinação de técnicas de atuação do leste, do Oriente e do Ocidente, porque eu vejo, e devo terminar minha tese com isso, em relação à atuação do Joaquim Fênix no Coringa, que eu observo a junção do No e do Butô em termos de movimento, gesto e velocidade de ação com a linguagem e a linhagem hollywoodiana de atuação. É isso. Thanks.
Fascinating. It's a very terrific, a wonderful insight. You know, when we were talking, when we were talking about this sort of Asian stylized acting before, I hadn't thought about this film. But I think you could say that the whole Hollywood blockbuster superhero movie uses that kind, to a degree, that kind of thing. It's not, you know, it's a mixture. You know, some of the actors can be naturalistic and realistic, but it requires of the actor something moving in this direction. But this film, Joker, is, yeah. Of course, it's motivated by the fact that the fellow is in a Joker. He's in costume and a clown. He's the clown we're all scared of. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You talk about the hero movies, and I think about the other style. It's a Harry Potter movies. If you take the effect, you take only the mimo, the movement.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good example. Yeah. In fact, I guess maybe it constitutes a certain how genre affects performance. That is, here we're dealing with fantasy, yeah.
I see these days Anthony Hopkins speak about the sense for the acting. For him, the acting is belief, only belief.
I see. Yeah. You mean belief in the role?
Yes.
Huh. Whatever works for him, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I find Hopkins an increasingly mannered actor, or at least once you've seen what he does, he just keeps on doing it. You know.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah.
Well.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll try again to talk a little bit. If I fail, or if the image blur or something, you can just tell me. Let me know, please. Okay. I was wondering because I'm an actor. Yeah, and and in theater, in my theater research, I realized that we are in a step that we just sometimes we even have a character there. We have a speech, we have a lyric text, we have an epic text. Yeah, and when I watch the huge amount of movies, I realize that the movies are still stuck in as I said, the Stanislavski-Brecht duality. And when I say about John Waters and Pink Flamingos films, and here in Brazil, I think that when you have in cinema some people who have other ways to see the world, other epistemologies, like other narrative. I think that the narratives change, but not only the narratives, the way that you build a character, or you even have a character, the way you change those things. And I think that this is a way out to this 20th century duality. I think that
yeah.
And I even think when we say here in Brazil, we have this discussion about the question of representativity in movies, and even the representation is in the world, I think, because we have other not, as I said, not only new narratives, but new ways to build characters, and even to build the film itself. Do you think that we can see here a way out to this 20th century hegemony that still rules the cinema?
So how would you describe the hegemony that you're talking about?
I think it's a naturalist
Natural
hegemony. Yeah. And even the naturalist hegemony, it's different. When you say about Brando, I think the Cynthia Barron is a scholar from the US. She has a book about the difference of modern acting and method acting.
Yeah.
And Brando is clearly a modern actor, not a method actor.
Yeah.
But I think that they are under this naturalistic hegemony, and we are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think somehow drama, as opposed to comedy, as opposed to certain other genres, is always associated in the popular mind with a certain kind of realism, and that a certain kind of highly masculine inflected naturalism is the popular idea of great acting. I try to push against. I've tried to push against that. I have never had a great deal of success teaching my book. A couple of times, I've taught. I've used my book as a textbook in a seminar about acting, and I've never felt that I had any success. A number of years ago, I was a guest at UCLA, and I taught this course for graduate students about acting. I thought it was a complete failure. But the thing I did on the first day, I said to the students, tell me what you think the difference is between movie acting and theater acting. And they said, well, you don't project very much in movies. You understate in movies. And I said, have you ever seen a movie called Night of the Hunter? You know the film I'm talking about. Yeah. They hadn't seen it. I thought, here I am at UCLA. These are graduate students. They've never seen this movie. It's so I just showed them a clip of Robert Mitchum doing the story of the left hand and the right hand, and that's not what they call movie acting, but it's great. It's great. So I think a lot of I guess part of the problem is what works for the popular audience. I think Night of the Hunter, when it originally appeared, was treated as some kind of fancy art film, and it didn't make a lot of money. But I think Mitchum's performance in that film is one of the greatest. Anyway, yeah. I don't know if I'm speaking to your concern, but
it's great for me because I'm a little bit. I'm trying to think other ways to push movie acting and find other example here in Brazil in contemporary Brazilian cinema. I'm trying to find those films who are out of this duality, who are trying to propose a new way or a new reflection about the acting art.
Yeah, but I wonder if maybe I wonder to what degree the performance style is influenced by the text. In other words, by the screenplay, by the genre. I mean, I think Charles Laughton, when he made Night of the Hunter, was doing something radical. He didn't have to make the film the way he did. He didn't have to do a combination of German expressionism and D.W. Griffith. But he did, so that the whole movie is highly, highly stylized. But I don't know, could you do, it would be an interesting movie, I suppose, if you took something like The Irishman, we were talking about as an example of naturalism. Could you do that in a different style? I guess you could, but it would be seen as a pastiche or some kind of commentary on the film, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that when you say about the text, I think we are still like film scripts are like modern drama plays. So we are still stuck there as well. Not stuck, but we are still doing the same thing that just Griffith did. We are searching the same goals, same naturalistic goals in a different way, of course. I think we are improving that, but it's the same goal. So I think it's difficult to go other way out. And when I find that Pink Flamingos, it's like a common referential, that I think that it's another way to look acting. It's like, but it's a comedy, you know. It's out of the drama style, and I think it's more free to go other ways.
Right.
And it's the 70s.
Yeah, I don't know what the conditions in Brazil are right now with movie theaters and with the economy of film production in Brazil. In the United States now, because of the virus, all of this is challenged a great deal, and it's becoming more like a streaming medium than a theatrical medium, movies. But it has always been at least where Hollywood is concerned, and in general, it's just a capital-intensive form of art. It's expensive, and the popular audience wants it that way. And I don't know, you know, I don't. So the filmmaker is always battling between what it costs and how many people are going to watch it. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think here in Brazil we had in the last 20 years a government support that now it's just ended, and it's very bad news about that. But in the last 20 years we had here like a development by government funds of new movie makers that came from different points of the country, and they have the government support to make the pictures, so they are more free from the capitalism schemes. And I think we have another we had there an opportunity to go away from like the drama heritage. So I'm gonna call Pedro now, and he will make another question for you. But thank you very much for your reflection here with me. Thank you very much.
Hello, Jim. I think we're headed toward the end. I would like just to leave two questions. First one, it's about your relation or your intimacy with Nelson Pereira dos Santos' work. We know that your wife, Darlene Sadler, she wrote a book about Nelson Pereira, and I would like to know if you were intimacy with his work, and what do you think about his work with the actors mainly?
His work, it's quite a variety of films, isn't it? I mean, because it ranges, a film like Boca de Ouro is very different from I'm sorry.
Vidas Secas.
Vidas Secas, right. So I never talked to him about this, but I would imagine that working with the actors in those two films was very different. I think Goldmouth is based on a theater piece, is it not? I believe it is. It's a play.
Boca de Ouro, yes.
Yeah, and the other is a novel, a kind of naturalist novel. And some of his films, right now I'm blanking on the titles, and some of his stuff in the 60s you know, like How Tasty Was My Little Frenchman, or some of those films there. I think they were influenced by, you know, Godard and their movements away from naturalist representation. So I don't think, I guess I'm trying to think, is there a Nelson approach to acting? And I don't know. I just think that he has such a wide range of stuff. I really love this little movie. I don't know what you think of it, but what's it called, about the two country western singers who are, I guess, real country western.
Na Estrada da Vida.
Yeah. I love that movie. And it's really just the two stars are playing themselves in the movie, right? And I just think it has great charm because it's not. It's just these performers going around Brazil.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're absolutely right. I just would like to hear you talking about him, but I agree with you. He doesn't have a unique style of working with actors, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is going to be our last question. I believe there is no more questions from the audience. But I would like to know, Jim, once that you are retired now, you're not teaching anymore, but you are still producing works. You're still writing books. I would like to know if you see some heritage of your acting studies tradition in United States or abroad. I would like you to tell us about some people that do the work that is close to yours and that are still, teaching and still in the university.
You do work that's close to mine. The book that you sent me, I think is quite wonderful. You know, one thing that happens with me is I've written a lot of things, and I tend, except in this case where I'm going back to write about Cary Grant, so I'm going back to something I've done before. I've never done that before, and it usually what happens when I write a book is that I lose. It's not that I lose interest in the topic. I don't want to spend the rest of my life writing about that topic. So something else, and I'm not necessarily aware of what influence my work has because I've been retired for a long time, and I don't go to conferences. I'm told somebody told me recently that when you do go to the academic conferences here and they're talking about acting, my work is always cited, which is, nice to know. Gee, now I've lost track of your question, but I can't give you an answer about how it's influenced. I know that the French, as you know, who had me there, were extremely interested in my work, and I was really gratified. It's the only thing by me that's ever been translated into French. Apparently they have a whole school of performance studies in France. I don't keep up with reading it, so I really don't know. Maybe.
Okay. Well, I believe we just finished.
Okay.
I really would like to thank you, Jim, very deeply from your generosity to be here today to discuss with us. I have already invited you once, and I re-invite you maybe one day to come to Brazil.
Yeah, I would like to do that, of course. And the world needs to get rid of the problem it's got right now.
Yes. But the invitation is... Sorry?
We were talking earlier about how the filmmaking used to be funded in Brazil. But I know that right now you're having trouble even maintaining the Cinematheque there.
Yeah.
We don't know how the election is going to go here, but let's hope things are going to get better for all of us. But control this virus. You know, my wife would love to be in Brazil right now, but can't be done.
And next time you must come too. We will arrange that.
Okay. All
Okay.
Right. Be
I would
great.
like to thank Eduardo, Guriva, João for the questions, Luisa that's already gone, and everybody that was with us in the audience. Thank you very much, Luciene, Mateus, Davi, Rogério, everybody from our group, from our study group. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye, bye, bye.